Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. It's 6 p.m. It's January 19th. The year is 2021. I remember when it was 1957, okay? And then it was 1958. So can it possibly really be 2021? It must be. Must be, because must ain't don't sound right. Anyways, this is my podcast. Mine alone. And hey, Chris and Liza. So I thought, hey, we're coming up on the inauguration. Get out the hat, because it's pretty meaningless after this, isn't it? So let's go over the events of the day or something. Hi, Kathy. Anybody can participate. I think I worked out the problem on YouTube. My daughter kind of walked me through it. She was supposed to show up today and actually walk me through it, but what she did was she phoned it in because she didn't show up. Lelo, Mark and Ann, Chris and Becky. Hey, Ann, thank you for that compliment on my hat. So I think I worked out the YouTube channel thing. I was going in the wrong way through the wrong address. I don't know. Anyways, we're simulcasting on YouTube. If you know somebody that doesn't use Facebook, doesn't want to use Facebook, they can use YouTube. Thank you, Travis. So, like I said at the beginning, like it's only 1 minute later, the hat's kind of like going to run out of utility soon, right? And so I'm getting my 25 cents worth before the end of the day. That my pillow guy could have been nice and sent pillows to all the troops sleep in the Capitol. Joan, he's in a little bit of trouble because Bed Bath & Beyond and several other stores, excuse me, have ceased to carry his product. They've notified him, and he is blaming a group called Sleeping Giant that he says are a bunch of liberal, extremists that are going around and threatening these companies and getting them to pull his inventory and discontinue. And they're just, this guy is unrepentant. So rather than cop to what he's done, he's going down with the ship. He's saying, it's these lefties, it's these extremists. They're bad people and trying to destroy my business now. Horrible, horrible things these people do to us. Now I got the hiccups and I got some. They are your kind of people, actually. And I was explaining to somebody about growing up in Hyde Park today. I took a walk with a friend of mine, Cynthia. I was trying to explain to her my propensity for progressive liberal politics. My parents were liberals, Democrats, but we didn't talk much. It wasn't like they infused me with liberal ideology. They were not openly hostile to progressive ideas, but they weren't like some of the Hyde Park parents. My parents were South Shore. They didn't go around and radicalize their kids or anything, right? But I told her, though, that when I got to Hyde Park at the age of 14, 15, and started hanging around the Blue Gargoyle, I believe that's where I was radicalized. And I use the word radicalized again because I want to drive it home that there is a group of people that you might normally think of as the Christian right, far right, and they have clearly, unequivocally, been radicalized of late through social media primarily and Fox News and One America. And they become extremely dangerous, and we need to be vigilant. on behalf of Biden and Harris. They're not a threat to you and I generally, but you should know there's I put a headline in. There was an article today. I don't even know what paper or what forum, but it said, a lot of these guys are former military and former law enforcement, and you better understand that these people are operating underground right now to try to bring down the government. Okay, so before it was just a plan to bring down the government. There was no real cohesiveness to it. And then Trump kind of got everybody coalescing, and they were like, yeah, we're taking back America, but they didn't see any need for violence, or extraordinary violence, because they had won the White House, and the White House sent everything downrange on their behalf. It gave them judges. It gave them dismantling of the EPA. It gave them dismantling of the voting accord, and on, right? So they didn't need to resort to violence except every now and then Charleston or something like that. But then was the election on in January. And was it January? When did we have the vote? December? November 8th. Then there was the election, and Trump lost. And so what happened was, that was the catalyst. That was what began to create the violent insurrection, okay? Because after they lost the election, after Trump lost it, instead of going quietly, he did what those kind of people do, the demagogues do. He started putting out a message. It was picked up by Fox. It was picked up by One America. It was picked up by Breitbart, whatever you call it. All these people were messaging that the election had been stolen, that the liberals, Democrats had literally stolen the United States of America from these people who were just getting comfortable owning the country, right? Keeping out these Mexicans, keeping the darkies down, lifting the white man up, talking power to the people. And then suddenly it came to a screeching halt. And rather than give it up, he helped to continue what had already started as the radicalization of far-right Christians. And so now what we have tens of thousands of people that I can think there's at least that many, there could be many more, who have been radicalized. Just as you read about intifada and radicalized Muslims, now you're going to hear about radicalized Christians. And you see them now. I mean, this woman in Frisco, this realtor in Frisco, she's facing prison, and either she got a phone call from the president, and he said, don't worry, I'm going to pardon you, because she asked for a pardon. But what befuddles me is she then went out, I'm sure against her lawyer's advice, and says, I'm not sorry for what I did. What I did, the president called me to do it, and I did it. So that's crazy on top of crazy. Okay, so you get arrested by the feds, you're charged with federal crime. Usually you contact the lawyer, and the lawyer says, don't talk to anybody. Certainly don't make any more admissions. And so this woman is like fearlessly saying, yes, I did it, I'm not sorry. So either she's expecting a pardon, or she's radicalized. And the interesting thing about radicalization is that we have not seen historically a radicalization of the middle class, the white middle class. When we think of it, it's typically been associated with Europe. It's been associated with Muslims primarily. Hi, Lisa. Whether it's the Algerians in France, there are many elements of radicalization, and most of them were adopted by groups that were oppressed in Europe and the Middle East. I don't know of another country, except for Nazi Germany, where so many people were radicalized. And in Germany, They didn't have a democracy, so to speak, in the sense that we've been practicing it. So when they became radicalized, um, there was a certain amount of authoritarian dictatorship element that kind of pushed everything forward. In the United States, what pushed it forward was this new element called social media, the internet. They didn't have that during World War II, you know that. Now, the voice of Germany is a small country in contrast to us, right? How do you get that kind of message out to 300 million people? Well, Facebook turned out to be a blessing for the right. Twitter turned out to be a blessing. All these media, all these platforms became an amplification of the message of Trump. And so now, for 4 years, and I don't know what happened before that. I'm just going to confine myself really. For 4 years, a little bit more, was since he started the campaign. We know that the Trump message has always been one of polarization, divisiveness, hostility, anger, fear, nurturing it, right? And so you got to understand, I don't understand them, but I understand the radicalization. I understand that these people believe the country's being taken from them. Hi, Jenny. What I don't understand is how do you feel deprived when you are a middle-class white person? That's the newness of American polarization, is that we have a significant population of right-wing Christian people who feel so disenfranchised. I don't know why. I'm just saying that's clear. That's clear. That they're willing to bring down the government in the name of patriotism, in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, in the name of Trump. It's a significant undertaking that required a mental attitude that we haven't seen in the past, not in the United States. Our population has had a divisiveness, usually on the haves and the have-nots. That was our classic struggle. It didn't matter if you were black, white, Mexican, whatever. It was the haves and the have-nots. And when finally people got to have, they almost universally, in many cases, maybe too broad a generalization, they abandoned the have-nots. So if you were black and you made it and you were very successful, it was not uncommon for you to be like Ben Carson and turn your back on your community of birth. But you've never seen in the United States this type of uprising from people that, from what we can tell, in the most part, I mean, the people they're arresting are not poor people. They're not disenfranchised in the classic sense of the word. A lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, that man's got a nice pension. He'll get Social Security. This guy was on pretty much easy street. He was married. He had kids, you know. I mean, the people that I see being arrested, and I pay attention, have all so far been white middle-class persons. The only other element that binds them is apparently some sort of appreciation for Jesus. You don't see a lot of Jews getting busted. Maybe that's coming. I don't think so, though. You don't see a lot of minorities. You see some. Again, there are people who, when they achieve a certain status, seemingly, typically, find they want to put distance. So you've got these Proud Boys, and the Proud Boys have quite a few Hispanics in their ranks. Not a lot of blacks, but a lot of Hispanics. And, to me, that's just classic. Just classic. So now that I've put that out there, let me put out what I think is the good news. Listen, I watched at the Capitol just now doing a memorial for persons who passed away from the COVID. And it's part of the transition. This should not have been necessary. This is not something that typically an incoming administration would kick off the jams with, kick the party off with, let's go do a memorial for the 350 to 400,000 people that have passed away in the past year, right? In the past year. So, what they did it. So what this is it's an acknowledgement by the incoming administration that the pandemic is one, national problem, and two, one that they are going to treat as if it is utterly real and utterly damaging, dangerous, right? So we're in this transitional, and there's so many elements to this transition. There is the screws being applied to Washington, D.C. Oh my God. If you don't get, hi Debbie, if you don't get the magnitude of 25,000 National Guard occupying a U.S. city, if you don't get the magnitude of the FBI having to run a background check, vet as many of those 25,000 as they can, and so far they've found, I don't remember how many, but they've been asked to stand down. They've been told they're no longer on Washington, D.C. duty, and it's not really that big a thing. So what they did is essentially, I'm sure they took everybody they could, and they got as many live people as they could to get online, start looking at Facebook pages, social media, anything they could find quickly. It's got to be quick. It's 25,000 guys. See if there's anybody that might be an infiltrator. 12. Thank you, Debbie. 12 guys have been told to stand down. They weren't fired. They weren't kicked out of the military, but there's some apprehension that this is going to come from within. And so that's transitional, because that's not always going to be, we don't think, right? We hope that they don't need this kind of security for the next 4 years for Biden. So the memorial is transitional. It's like a firing of one of the shots over the heads of, everybody, like, let's get your attention. And I had, if you saw it, there was the lights, there was the flags, there were the speeches, there were the songs. Simultaneously, transitionally, we are still waiting for the Trump administration to announce who exactly has been pardoned. Has it really been 100 plus? And by the way, 100 plus, I did a little bit of looking, 100 plus, he hasn't really pardoned that many people. He's not getting the heat for pardoning too many people. His heat is exclusively based upon who he tends to pardon. So he won't have to pardon near as many people as Bush or Clinton or Obama in order to get notoriety. He's going to get the notoriety because he's already embarked on a path to pardon his friends. Not just his friends, by the way, his friends who were in a position to implicate him in possible crimes. So that's why he's getting notorious for pardons. It's not the volume. I mean, when we say there's going to be 100 pardons at the last minute, it's really not that many. The other element of that is, historically, pardons were run through the Justice Department and vetted to make sure they wouldn't come back and embarrass the administration. So is the person that you're going to pardon, are they worthy? Do they meet certain elements? Have they shown some contrition, reformation, rehabilitation? Are they going to embarrass the administration by recommitting another crime at some point? What is historically, what does this person do? So none of that's happening. The Justice Department reports that those people that typically would vet persons who are going to be pardoned has had nothing to do with any of this, which leads us to believe that it's going to be people he has some sort of contact with, because I don't think Trump wants any further embarrassment than he's already suffered. Do you think Joe Exotic bought a pardon? He's got a limo waiting outside the jail in Fort. Man, I didn't hear anything about that, Joan. Um, that's just weird. How do they know he's got a limo waiting? I guess you walk up to the limo driver and say, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I'm waiting for Joe Exotic." Let me do a disclaimer here. I've heard of Joe Exotic. I know nothing about this Tiger thing. I know that Joe Exotic is in jail. I know he's got something to do with that TV series, but I've never watched it. I don't know anything about it, and so I don't know. I don't know what he's in for, and I don't know how he'll get out. And I don't know what his relationship might be to the Trump. But I would say this: given if we don't know more, and suddenly a limo shows up outside the jail, then it would seem like Joe's expecting a shift in circumstances. So I would guess it might be. I mean, it's the kind of thing that Trump would like to do because he likes the action. He likes being in the limelight. Um, and as a result, to this Joe Exotic has been in the news a million times. I just don't read the stories, right? So it would be one way to raise the Trumpian profile right now to go ahead and pardon another crazy person, right? Okay, 5 o'clock local news. Then, if it's local news, they ain't making it up. So let's see what happens. It's got to happen, I would think, in the next few hours. I actually thought that the release of the names would have already taken place. He can do it anytime up until he's out of office tomorrow. And the inauguration is not till the afternoon. So Trump still has maybe 12 good hours to screw us. No, about 18 hours to screw us up still. We'll see what he's doing. I mean, like, he just removed the border restrictions and said the people in South America and stuff can come in without being COVID quarantined or COVID tested. I mean, it was in the last, since January 6th, there's been many crazy things that this administration has been associated with. But I will tell you this. I don't think that we've seen anything crazier than lifting travel restrictions the day before you leave office, when you know that the incoming administration is going to overturn it in a minute after they take power. And you know that the new administration is absolutely going to be looking at this pandemic with a much more jaundiced eye, to just flagrantly say, we're just going to do this just for no good reason except to piss off anybody that's not with me. It was that ridiculous. So, amazing. So anyways, the Biden administration will restrict travel, as they should. Every other country is restricting travel, and we're going to restrict travel. And we're going to do a lot of things differently starting tomorrow afternoon. Now, the president doesn't necessarily have the authority to mandate a mask for everybody. He is already announced he's going to mandate masks on federal property. That he can do. And that's a lot of territory, but it's not enough. The question is, will people ultimately go along and just surrender and say, well, we got a new sheriff in town. Let's just do this. Let's see what happens. I suspect that we are so riven as a society that we're going to get very little cooperation from the anti-maskers. That's just my suspicion. I don't see changes in behavior based upon Biden taking the presidency, because we have seen such a resistance, such a reluctance to acknowledge and to move forward with the new administration. Now, the good news on the flip side of that is who are we? All right, non-Trumpers now have somebody at the helm, somebody at the steering wheel who can force this country in a new direction. Just as Trump was able to force us to the left, I shouldn't say left because it was to the right, so can Biden change directions. And he won't need Congress to do a lot of that. He'll do it by executive order. First thing he's going to do, he's going to undo executive orders that were done that made no sense and did not benefit the country. So he'll do that. He'll vacate those executive orders. He'll implement new executive orders. Will he be able to get along, or should I say, will the Republicans in the Senate get along with him and help us move the agenda about the pandemic forward? That nobody knows. Not nobody. Okay. When does Biden's position as president take place? Should something unforeseen happen, when can he execute his powers that be? And Ann says noon tomorrow. And I don't know. I know it's tomorrow afternoon. So yeah, there's nothing he can do. I mean, if something happens to Biden, then I assume that at the time of the inauguration, then Kamala would be in charge, and if something happened to her, Pelosi be in charge. So, or maybe if it happens before the inauguration, I guess who'd be in charge? Pence. And does anybody never want to touch the presidency right now? It's probably Pence. Pence probably wants this all over with. He's probably just got his fingers crossed that nothing crazy happens now, because this is, while he may have had some taste for power and taking over the presidency, this is probably not the time he wants to do it. Although I suspect he's running the government as best he can from behind the curtain so that Trump will carry on. So we'll see. We'll see. It's just conjecture. I mean, just don't know. As far as unforeseen, there is nothing really that we can do to prevent certain things from taking place by the president of the United States, who at the moment is Donald Trump. He has powers. He has the power to execute his authority. What we suspect is, and I talked about this yesterday, I suspect that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the heads of all the military operations in the country, wherever they're located, the Joint Chiefs of Staff did not issue their statement last week in a vacuum. I believe that the statement that they demand that all military personnel throughout the world adhere to the Constitution, that Joe Biden was the constitutional elected president-elect, and that the events at the Capitol were to be characterized as insurrection and sedition. And that was extraordinary and unusual. Why would they do it? I believe they've already anticipated that the single most challenging threat to democracy by President Trump would come in the form of some sort of military action. And so I think they really wanted to assure people in the only way they could, without themselves being insurrectionists and rebellious, was to simply put out this statement in support of the constitutional process that was unfolding before everybody's eyes. So I don't think anything of that magnitude will take place. There won't be any missile launches suddenly. They're just not going to tolerate a sudden action. So if he can't use the military, then he really has nominal authority to do anything that dramatic that we need to undo immediately. He's doing it. I mean, he's been doing the crazy stuff. If you believe in politics, if you believe in history, whether you've read any, but you at least you watch news, let me say on major news networks or major networks, what they call mainstream news. If you are an adherent to that and you're not getting your news primarily from Fox or One America, then you're getting pretty good information. You're getting fairly solid information. I'm not suggesting you listen to the pundits that tend to lean left and are talking about progressive agendas. I'm talking about the persons that they're getting information from, whether it's about the pandemic, when they're interviewing doctors about how do you get this vaccination thing ramped up, when they're talking to people like former head of FEMA or former head of Homeland Security about How do you go about when Biden becomes president? You will hear facts. You will hear people that know their business, that even if they're partisan, it's irrelevant because they're not talking about partisanship. So the talking head, whether it's Nicole Wallace, who's been a lifelong Republican, or Ari Melber, who I think has probably been a Democrat, doesn't matter. If you don't like what they're saying, it doesn't matter. You still need to get your news from them because they reach out to people who have the credentials to bring you the information you need about things like the pandemic, about things like the global warming, about all the environmental issues. Okay. So pay attention. If you've given up on those news sources, let me beg you, return to them as you did when you were younger, because there is solid information. If you fact check these persons that maybe for whatever reason now you suspect, oh, who do I trust? Is the liars on the right? There's the liars on the left, the extremists on the right, extremists on the left. I don't know who to believe. You don't have to know who to believe, but you need to be able to believe in facts, right? Yes, MSNBC is a trustworthy channel. I'm being asked by Kathy. MSNBC is trustworthy in this respect. Nicole Wallace is a good 2-hour show. Nicole is not, she's a partisan in this regard. She worked for Bush. I think she was his spokesperson or one of those jobs. Nicole Wallace is a lifelong Republican. She doesn't like Trump. It's clear she doesn't like Trump. You can listen to Nicole Wallace. She'll never say anything nice about Trump. But she will bring you information from, let's say, a professor at Harvard or a professor at Stanford or the person who's head of some think tank, like the FEMA. They'll bring you somebody from FEMA or from the CDC or the FTC. They'll bring these people on, and so you listen to them. You don't have to worry yourself about whether Nicole is a partisan. She's become a partisan, and that's okay. You don't have to worry. On MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, lifelong Republican, conservative Republican, does the Joe Scarborough show at 5 a.m. every morning on MSNBC. Is he partisan? Well, yeah, he's very partisan. Does he like Trump? Hates him. Hates him. Joe makes the comments. People think he's liberal because he's attacked Trump, and he helped support Trump in the beginning. But that's not the point. You don't need to trust Joe Scarborough or his wife, Mika. What you have to trust, though, is that they're bringing in people whose credentials are, in some cases, extraordinary, and that's what you're looking for. Now, I also like hearing commentary. I like Joe attacking Trump. I like Ari Melber. I like Hayes on MSNBC. I like a lot of their pundits, but I'm not listening to them for news. Okay, but I will check CNN. What is CNN saying? Who are they interviewing? CNN has a deep bench, what do you call it, bullpen of really smart people that can come in and talk on most subjects, starting with Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay Gupta is a well-respected doctor, and he talks about the pandemic, all about COVID-19 all the time. So you don't have to trust Anderson Cooper. You don't have to trust Don Lemon. They are pundits. They're not experts in any field. They'll express opinions freely, both of them. It doesn't matter. You just have to listen to the people they bring in and determine for yourself. Listen, I did trial after trial after trial, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to tell you that one of the things that the judge will tell the jury at the beginning of every trial is it is your job to determine the credibility of all the witnesses who appear here and the credibility of any evidence that's presented here. So if it's paper evidence, it'll go to the jury and they will look at it. Now, if it's scientific or it's something that I'm concerned that this jury's just not going to understand, they're not scientists. If I have that kind of case, it's on me if I'm going to put that evidence in to bring in somebody to break it down. to explain it, to make it edible by persons who don't normally have to eat this. So if I want to talk about gunshot residue, I can't just put in gunshot residue evidence. I can't just give you this scientific analysis of the clothing that shows that there was no gunshot residue. That's not sufficient. I'm going to have to bring in somebody, I'm going to put them on the stand, and I'm going to have to do what's called voir dire him. I have to if I want him to be treated as an expert, one of the steps I have to do is I have to have him take the stand before, oftentimes before the jury's in the room. It depends. It's up to the judge. If the judge has not required, or the other side hasn't asked that the credentials be proffered before, I mean, I have to give them the credentials, but to question them, they will have the jury there oftentimes, and sometimes not. I say, okay, Mr. Goldberg, can you tell everybody how old are you and how far did you go in school? Well, my name's Ken Goldberg, and I went through, I've got a college degree. I got a bachelor's of science in social services, and I've got a Juris Doctor in law. Okay. And then, Mr. Goldberg, do you have any background with firearms? Well, yes, I've been a firearms instructor for the past 20 years. I used to own a gun range, a very prominent gun range in Dallas, Texas, and I was responsible for the buying and selling of firearms for 5 years. Okay. And do you know the difference between a Glock and a whatever? Yeah, I know. Whatever. All I'm saying is at the end, somebody determines whether or not in that inquiry did I establish credentials significant enough for a jury to believe that I know what I'm talking about. Not that I'm being truthful. Should I know? There's a judge and everybody come in. Okay, now, let's say it's me. I've got a gunshot residue test, and I'm the one who's going to explain it. I'm going to sit there while I'm being asked questions by the attorney, and I'm going to explain, first up, what is a gunshot residue test? What exactly is it? What is it determining? How is that determined? Why is it reliable, right? At the end of my presentation, I'm going to be, if I were the testifier, I'm going to be proffered to the other side, in this case, the prosecution, because I always do defense work. And then the prosecution is going to try to tear me apart and say that, whatever I'm saying is biased, or they can refute it or impeach me with better evidence, et cetera, et cetera. And then the jury is told at the end of the case, this type of evidence is for you to decide what's credible. What do you believe or don't believe? And then upon that, you will make a decision. You will render a verdict based on the evidence in the case. It is not uncommon, since I won more than I lost usually, that the jury would go out and they would evaluate the state's case, and they would decide that the state had not proven its case, and my client was not guilty. So what happened? I mean, they arrested my client. They charged him with crime. They had the Chicago Police Department investigated. They had investigators from the prosecutor's office. They had labs that they had access to if they needed whatever. So it looked like we were in bad straits. Well, because once something is out there, in this case in a trial or in the case of the news, somebody may have refuted it. So that's why you can trust news that is open to being challenged, but first is presented by people with the authority to present that news. Scientists presenting information about science. Epidemiologists like Anthony Fauci, who is giving you information about a pandemic, about a virus. See, in contrast, if you've been watching Fox, and I assure you, I've watched Fox, bring in a guy who's a radiologist to discuss a pandemic. Here's the flaw. Here's where the trial goes. This is where the prosecution loses. This guy doesn't know what we call epidemiology, the study of viruses. So he gets on Fox News and they ask him questions, loaded questions, and he answers them as if he knows. But he's going uncontested. They don't put him on with Fauci because Fauci would say, "You're a dunce. You don't know what you're talking about. You read X-rays. You don't know first thing about how a virus is communicated, and what are the precursor? What preliminaries will you experience if you are studying epidemiology and you're studying a specific virus? A radiologist couldn't tell you the first thing about the mutation of the virus. House he can. So we all should be looking to the mainstream media more than ever for solid information. Again, eliminate the partisanship. Fine. I know you want to be right wing when this is over, be right wing. You want to be far left, be far left. I don't care. All I'm saying is that facts, facts, facts. And where do you get facts? Well, I've tested various media. I've tested Fox News. I've tested MSNBC. I tested CNN, ABC, CBS. I haven't looked at One America because from pretty much every source that I would trust, One America is not a news source. It's a propaganda vehicle. So there's no need for me to look for news from a propaganda vehicle. The problem with Fox News is they started out with a news network that was fairly benign. They were going around getting news, but the head of it, Roger Ailes, was a very right-thinking guy. By right, I mean far right. And he used it as a tool to promote right-wing ideologies, and then it got co-opted by the entire Trump vehicle. So Fox News is no longer primarily a news station, which it was kind of invented for, right? And because it succeeded as a propaganda vehicle long before Trump became president, for many years now, Fox News was seen as a solid right-wing propaganda machine that was able to trash CNN, which was the leading news source in the world for years, bigger than the BBC. Okay? So CNN, Iraq War, shot out into the galaxy. It was so big. And eventually Fox News under Roger Ailes eroded the audience that was there for CNN. And now we're just stuck with what we're stuck with. Well, it's 6:42 and I have rambled about something I don't even know what the hell I was talking about. Well, I do know what I was talking about. I guess I meant I'm talking about something I didn't mean to talk about. It's Tuesday evening. I posted Tuesday afternoon. So if you want to hear the song by the Moody Blues, just click on it. You can listen to it. Because yesterday I played Manic Monday. Today it's Tuesday afternoon. I don't know if I'm going to have a Wednesday song tomorrow, but I thought for 2 days, it's one way to post a theme. So listen, all I'm trying to tell you is I'm on the rise, baby. You know, my horse came in. Pow! My horse came in. You dig what I'm saying? I bet on a winner. Whew. Now, if only he gets the prize money, i.e. becomes president of the United States, without any intrusion, without any violence, that would be great. But Meta, yes. Tomorrow I'll play Hail to the Chief. You know, might not be. I'll probably forget by tomorrow, Joan. You might have to remind me, but that might be fun. All right. So it's time to put our hands together before our hearts. And you know, as difficult as it was to send out Meta over these many months, we did. As hard as it can be to generate goodwill in a time of great oppression, we did. And so we certainly can be even more benevolent, even more kind now in this moment of transition in our society. So let's start always, though, with ourselves first. So if you're joining me, you think to yourself, may I be happy, healthy, and free from harm? May I be free from anger, anxiety, and fear. May this practice of ours lead to greater peace and comfort. May my mother and father, all my family members, and all my friends be happy, be healthy, be free from harm. May they too find the path, the vehicle that carries them to a life of greater peace and comfort. May those persons I harbor ill will towards, politically, socially, professionally, doesn't matter. This is the moment to give it up, if only for the moment. May those persons be happy, healthy, and free from harm. May they enjoy lives of comfort, peace, and joy. And may all living beings, wherever they may be the recipient of our collective goodwill, our collective compassion, so that all living beings, humans and non-humans, wherever they may be, wherever they may reside, will know of our intention, and that all living beings will be happy, healthy, free from harm. May all living beings be safe, comfortable, and at peace. Thank you, Joan and Kathy. And I don't know if Ginny stuck around. I hope Ginny did. I hope that Mark and Ann, I know Ann's here. She waited for Meta, and Liza and Lisa and Debbie. That's nice. I'm glad you found me, Debbie. I had to stop broadcasting. I had to make room for my YouTube. Travis, Chris and Becky, Kathy, Liza, all of you, and anybody who never checked in, you never made a comment, so I didn't know you were there. I send out greetings to you from my planet to your planet. Okay, let's try this again tomorrow if you're up for it. Tomorrow we should be really upbeat, because tomorrow, unless something really whacked happens, we really will be starting a whole new deal. Hey, Donna, thank you. Thank you, Donna. You were sneaking around there. I didn't know you were there. All right. Okay. Thank you.